네, 안녕하세요. 이 프로그램은 동시 통역이 진행되고 있으니 송신기에서 한국어 채널은 1번, 영어 채널은 2번으로 맞추고 이용해 주시기 바랍니다. 아트부산 컨버세이션스에서는 현재 미술계의 주요 이슈를 소개하고 주목해야 할 새로운 작가들을 선정하여 관객들에게 소개하고 있습니다. 올해는 디스커버 AI 아트와 아티스트 대담이 총 6개의 세션으로 진행되고 있는데요. 이번 섹션은 특별히 올해 아트부산에서 아티스트 대담과 디스커버 AI 아트가 맞닿아 있는 섹션이라고 할 수 있습니다. 영국에서 가장 영향력 있는 작가 중에 하나인 디지털 아티스트 매튜스톤과 정석호 모더레이터와 함께 디지털 아트 파헤치기라는 주제로 컨버세이션스 시작하겠습니다.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for joining our program today.
Of
Can
course.
you see me well?
I do, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we are looking at you at a full screen, so I was just wondering if you could see me, vice versa. Okay,
Yeah, the camera zoomed in on you. So
Okay,
hey, good to
okay.
see you. And thanks so much for having me.
So you're based in London. You also have a studio there, but I heard you are currently in Japan.
Yes.
So
Yeah, so I'm on local time.
Okay, hopefully, so that's convenient for us to proceed with this program. But hopefully, you can travel to Busan in the near
Yeah.
future so that we could meet in person and also with our audience.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we begin, I'm sure there are already your fans and collectors here. But for those of our audiences who are curious to learn about who you are as an artist, could you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Matthew Stone. I'm an artist. I studied painting at Camberwell College of Arts in London, graduating in 2004. I've been involved in lots of different kind of countercultural and experimental things. Like in London, I was part of an art collective, and we would take over empty buildings and organize exhibitions and parties. And I was working with fashion designers and musicians and things. So I've had a very kind of cross-disciplinary process in my work, but primarily there has always been a focus on painting, and specifically thinking about painting as something that is not just an what I might call an antiquated technology, but like in a sense the history of images. And so I feel personally that I have a responsibility to connect to the lineage of painting, but also think about and make paintings in ways that are reflective of the way that we live today. And I guess what we're going to talk about is the way that the digital is not only a part of that, but increasingly sort of dominating my ways of working. So yeah, I've shown a lot in Korea, and I've visited from some of those exhibitions. And yeah, so it's a great privilege to be speaking here today. So thank you for giving me some time to introduce myself. And yeah,
I'm personally quite familiar with your works, your digital printed works, via our good friend Choi and Choi Gallery, because they have been participating at our fair since 2014, if I recall correctly. So it's been the 10th year now. So
Amazing.
the Art Busan this year marks the 12th edition of the fair. So
Congrats.
it's just not me myself, but there are many other collectors in Korea who are already familiar with your works. Not to mention your global fans and collectors. But I was just looking at your CV this morning, and you went to art school, but you majored in painting. And so
Yeah.
I was wondering how you first started to decide to be working with digital medium.
So so essentially, I grew up using Photoshop. So when I was like and also the internet. I think when I was asking my dad recently, but apparently when I was 11, on Saturday mornings, he would take me into town to like drop me off at an internet cafe, and I would go online. And at the time, this was, I guess, in the mid to late 90s, and I was going to be, as like an 11 or 12-year-old, I was going to be on a TV show about people who used the internet. Because at that point, that was an interesting, that was an unusual thing to do. So I feel like my interest in digital technology has always been there. And so, yeah, but that said, when I was studying painting, I was making traditional oil paintings, but I was also making performance and sculpture and music, and I was working, in a way, I was working with digital tools on all of those things. So when I was making a painting, I was making a collage in Photoshop beforehand to work with. So for me, that, in a sense, I guess, when I graduated, the main piece that I showed was a large printed digital collage of photographs that I'd taken of my friends. And they had this very sort of Caravaggesque, dramatically lit and kind of highly staged setup. And so from there, I was making these photographs using my friends, you know, people that I was meeting in nightclubs, people who were performance artists in bands, fashion designers, things like that. And so there was this idea of kind of the people around me, that the network was a kind of living collaborative artwork, and that the photographs at the time that I was taking were kind of my like paintings of that scene in a way. And aesthetically, I was trying to link them to art history and make photographs that when you looked at them, they had qualities that reminded you of painting and encouraged the viewer to look at them in the way that we look at paintings. Because I think something that is a great gift of painting is the cultural context that we've built around painting, which is one of slowness and of spending time with an image, in a sense. And so, yeah, so I was making these photographs. I then, at one point, started photographing paint. And so I was using individual images of individual brushstrokes and printing them as large gestural brushstrokes onto linen and wood. And I was adding in shadows because I wanted there to be a sense of space, a sense of depth, and to reflect like a space within the canvas that wasn't 3-point perspective in a sense. It was more about the idea that the paint stroke itself could be a thing that was depicted, much like how Roy Lichtenstein painted brushstrokes, images of brushstrokes with brushstrokes. And I was kind of quite inspired by that idea that paint itself was a thing in the world that could be depicted. And so from there, I started using 3D software because I wanted to make more complicated shadows. So rather than just stacking brushstroke in 2-dimensional layers in Photoshop and adding these fake shadows to give this illusionistic sense of depth, I realized that with 3D modeling software, I would be able to make more accurate and more complicated brushstrokes, shadows, lighting, all of these things. And so I took those individual brushstrokes into the 3D software and was putting them on like curved planes so that they were undulating through space. And while I was doing that, I had the texture prepared, because you have like materials in 3D software that you can apply to the virtual models. And I clicked and I created a sphere. And on the sphere, I thought, what happens if I drop the brushstroke onto the sphere? instead of just the flat plane, which was the Photoshop thinking. And when I dropped it on, it looked like a painting of a ball. And that was the moment where I was like, hang on a minute. This is, I could work in this way and create images of things. And so that was really that kind of playful, exploratory, almost, well, they say happy accident, revealed the kind of beginning of this digital painting process that I've, spent the last 10 years or so developing. I'm going to share my screen because I've made a little, it says, only the host can share. So if it's possible to change the Zoom settings so that I can share my screen, that would be great.
화면 공유 가능하도록 설정 좀 부탁드릴게요. It's on. Can you retry?
Yep. It's not working yet, but I'll try again in a moment. But so hopefully that goes some way to answer your question about sort of how the digital came in. It was always there, but I think in terms of finding this like new digital painting language and establishing a new workflow that is defined by 3D virtual space, that was sort of my moment or realization.
Then during this, since this happy incident moment, during
Yeah.
the past 10 years, over the past 10 years, have you also played and experimented with other medium as well, or have you been focusing only with digital medium?
Well, I think in a way, part of the digital is sort of, there are so many tools within the digital sort of realm that I can make like virtual sculpture, I can make animation, I can make a video and then add some animated digital aspect into that. And I think, and so in a way, I've used these works on linen. So I make these printed canvases that I am now quite confident in calling them paintings. They are printed, but I think very much in the lineage of Warhol's screen prints. They are, they're part of the history of technology in relation to painting, and so for me, they are paintings. And so in a way, these works have become windows into my digital workflow and world. And so I'm just going to share my screen now.
Okay.
Okay. And so, are you able to see my screen okay? Is
Yes.
that coming up, or is it
Yes.
just still my video?
We're looking at your face on the top right corner.
Yeah.
So nice, but we're seeing your screen. Very nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of press play. And this just initially gives us a view into the sort of the sense of virtual space, which I'm able to work with while I'm structuring these works. And I'm just going to let it play now. We don't necessarily need to refer to exactly what's happening there, but hopefully it sort of adds a layer. And, if there are specific parts that feel relevant to talk about that are in line with our questioning, we can come back to that. But yeah, so these printed linen works have felt like they are windows into this space. They're the points at which I might lock off all of this kind of open potential that exists within the software and the models and the brush strokes. I have a big archive of images, so photographs of physical brush strokes that I have photographed and that I use and combine across these models. So for example, on the left of the screen, you see just the kind of sculptural elements, and you see me editing the bodies, changing and defining the pose. And then, I'm taking those models and stamping the brushstrokes onto them and collaging them in various ways. to create the imagery that I make. This sort of video game type environment is a virtual world called Cryptovoxels. It's at the bottom left of the screen right now. And this is a virtual gallery that I own. So I purchased this land as an NFT. And I sometimes make exhibitions in this space to provide a virtual version of the exhibitions that people can drop into and navigate and explore the works and their relationships in 3D space. And so we've got a representation of the sculpture there and then a render of the sculpture in the background. So yeah.
Thank you for this. Seems so interesting. You've been focused with the digital medium for over the past 10 years, and you have such an amazing experience, and you are so focused with this medium. And I'm curious to learn about your personal view on digital art, because you have you seem to be having very strong passion about this specific medium. And if I recall correctly, you personally believe that it's not very meaningful to distinguish between what is digital and what is real. So
Yeah.
could you briefly elaborate your view on this?
Yeah, so I think that in a simple way, digital things are part of the real. And whilst they represent, we're not looking at a physical gallery when we look at this sort of, my gallery within the metaverse, so to speak. We are all looking at the moving image, and when you look at a painting of an apple, we're all in agreement that it's not an apple. So in my mind, we've had via painting and mark making and, illusionistic mark making and image making, we have had a sense of the virtual for a long time. And so in a sense, I think that there is something about, I feel like we're in a period of integration and very much a transformative period of human history and the history of art, where technology is radically changing the speed at which we can create things, but also what we can create and the way that we can link those things together. People often talk about digital and physical as a distinction to talk about traditional analog artworks, so paintings, sculptures, things like that, and then digital works as being kind of things on screens. And whilst I understand the distinction, I think it is useful to consider the fact that all digital art relies on physical hardware for us to experience it. So we need the screens, we need, our phones, the projector that's shining me onto the wall. All of those are physical things. And so on a semantic level, this distinction between physical and digital, I think, might hold us back in the long term if we don't interrogate it a little bit deeper and limit the way that we can think about these sort of complex new situations that we're being faced with, both as creatives but also as audiences for art. So yeah, I think that in a sense it is more complicated. There is many more situations and things to think about, but I also think that complexity is something that we can hold and face and think about and talk about in ways that are illuminating, hopefully.
Okay, you are a very strong ambassador of digital art. Since you've been working with this particular medium for almost 10 years now, I'm sure how you believe and how you value digital art may be different from how the public or the audience, whether in Korea or in London or elsewhere in the globe, view and value digital art. Do you feel as if there has been a positive change and shift in terms of how the public perceives digital art?
I do think that I think there has been a shift, and I think for some people, I think it's definitely a kind of divisive issue. But I think that NFTs created a real shift in the way that a lot of people think about and look at digital art. And so I think in many ways, the arrival of the NFT, which allowed for the further commodification of digital art, because people have been making art with computers since arguably the 1950s. So there is a long history of digital art and of institutional figures who have worked diligently to catalog the developments with, before and after NFTs. But I think in terms of the popular imagination, with the idea that a digital work that doesn't have a fixed physical presence, so the canvases that I make function like traditional art objects. They require storage, they require transportation, and I'm happy if people want to pay in Ethereum, but they don't rely on using cryptocurrencies for their purchase. But I do think that in a sense the NFT allowed for the kind of the financialization of digital art to become more widespread, and for better or worse, that has turbocharged the conversation around digital art. There do seem to be more people engaging in a serious cultural conversation around what these developments represent and how they relate to art history on a wider arc.
Okay, you briefly mentioned NFT. If I recall correctly, you also have experience with NFT. You produced works in NFT format recently, last year, right?
Yeah, so I have produced NFTs. I've produced physical works that have a mirror as an NFT. So if you buy the NFT, you've got the physical canvas. And equally, if you bought the NFT, which way did I say it? If you buy the canvas via more traditional means from the gallery, then I transfer the NFT to you. But it's also been a really useful technology to create a kind of virtual object or representation or blockchain receipt, in a sense, for digital works that I've made that have included animation. And I think also engaging in the culture around NFTs, because there is a very strong artist-led and I think very significant movement of artists who are connected on Twitter, the NFT community, as many people might refer to it, that for me was a real inspiration in terms of connecting with new artists and finding a supportive network of other artists. I hadn't always found that in the traditional art world. And amongst other artists, there had often been a kind of sense of, I don't know, maybe competition or something. But with NFTs, there was, it's quite an amazing cultural moment to have been able to connect with in a small way. But yeah.
Okay, then do you plan to continue to produce works in NFT as well in the future?
Yeah, it's my feeling that I don't know what the timeline is. For me, I believe very strongly in the technology. I think it's very elegant and provides solutions for cataloging and proving the kind of provenance of artists' works. And so I personally can see a future where artists working in all types of mediums will use NFTs as certificates of authenticity, even if they're not necessarily working in a digital first way. So for me, I'm very much still sort of exploring how it can fit into my existing practice, but also trying to stay open to the new paradigms and ways of collecting and activating new experiences around art that the technology creates. So I feel like for me personally, it's an evolving thing, and it's something that I really enjoy keeping track of and watching the development, because I think there's a lot of really interesting people doing things, and I think that in 10 years' time, it will be about looking back and understanding what was happening, because it's not easy to jump into the conversation and understand exactly what's happening unless you have some level of passion for the technology, I think.
So you're very open and positive about the technological developments and what it has to offer in terms of new mediums and new options as artists to experiment, try on. So is there any particular technology? I mean, there had been like blockchain, metaverse, NFT, and now it's all crazy about AI technology.
Yeah.
Is there a particular type of technology that you have interest in?
Yeah, so at the moment, like many other artists, I'm very much diving into AI. I want to, in a sense, expose my brain to it. And I feel like it is very clearly a new and different way of working and of creating images. And very quickly, there is many different ways within AI to create images. I've been working to train AI using my own artworks as data points, and experimenting with what happens when I use that technology to kind of generate new images that very quickly that are based on creative decisions that I've made and that have accumulated over the course of my career. And it's a very, very interesting process to watch those things be reflected back to you. I think earlier in the video, there was a stream of AI imagery that was coming in, and there'll be some more coming up in a moment. So I can, we can point to that. But it is, yeah, it's a very interesting tool. And I put emphasis on the word tool because I think that on first glance, it can seem like this is something that is taking away creativity, removing the opportunity for artists to express themselves and giving that over to a machine. Whereas I have found, in my experience, it to be almost the opposite, where it's been hugely exciting, creating and sparking a lot of inspiration, essentially.
Okay, so even among the artist groups, there are artists like you who are very open to trying and adapt new things, new technology, new medium. But there are artists who are very focused with conventional, traditional type of medium. So there is this distinction even within the artists. But I mean, when we look at the public, there seems to be a lot of misconception or even fear, in a sense, since the technology seems to be developing and changing so rapidly and so fast. So it'll be very interesting to elaborate your view on this, why there may be such a strong misconception and fear about digital art, not digital only, but AI technology in particular.
So I guess the first thing I would say is that I think I am, as much as I'm excited and energized by the process of working with AI, I am agnostic as to what will happen. I don't think that everybody who experiences fear of AI, I don't think it's necessarily the result of a misconception. I think that actually, certainly in my own case, my conception of AI is evolving. And the way that I am able to develop understanding of technology is by using it. So whilst I find it very exciting, I don't know where it's going, but I know that I want to be part of where it goes. And I think that there is, in a way, there is always fear of the new, the shock of the new, as it's been referred to in the past, as, humanity's ideas about art and creativity have shifted radically. And I think that at large, particularly after the pandemic, and I mean, we're here on Zoom, but, everybody used Zoom for such a long time. I feel like after the pandemic, and then we were talking about the metaverse and talking about NFTs, there was this feeling that the reality that we occupy and that we love, our lives, in relation to each other, was somehow disappearing. And that this was, that we were going to be left with this sensation that like nothing was real anymore. And I think that is a kind of trauma-informed post-pandemic response, and I think that it's valid, but it's also, I think that we should be like robust in the way that we think about these things and not become overwhelmed by those fears, so that essentially as many people as possible who have good intentions can be involved in shaping the narrative or what happens with these tools. I'm not in a position to steer the decisions made by large AI corporations, but I can shape culture. And so for me, in using AI, I am interested in and looking always to bring all of the things that I value about being alive, about being a human, about being in relationship with other people, to the processes that I use. And so the messiness, the humanity, I mean, these, for example, on the screen right now, these images coming in are outputs from an AI that's been trained on my work. It's slightly sped up, but not a lot. And they come in, I think it takes 1.4 seconds for each one to be generated.
1.4 seconds.
Yeah. So it's obviously much faster here, but I wanted to give a real visceral sensation of what it was like for me to train this model, put these things in and kind of press play in a sense and watch this stream of imagery. And it was new. It was a real, like, it felt like a paradigm shift, something that I hadn't experienced before. And initially I had this feeling of like, that I had somehow closed the gap between the desire to make an artwork and making it, and that I could just sort of witness these things being born in the same way that I had been always searching for within my own work. And then very quickly I realized that I wasn't satisfied with the outcomes and that I would have to push them and work them in exactly the same ways that I had done with anything I'd made before. But there is, I think, with automation, which is what is happening here, and AI is not the first automation that artists have experienced. Like widely available pigments that are made already for you, paintbrushes that you haven't had to put together yourself, or like there's all types of technology that artists have integrated into their practices and that have shaped the way that they've thought about and made art. And a lot of people have made a comparison between the arrival of AI image generation and the arrival of photography. And I think what's interesting about looking at the history of art after photography is that the priorities and the areas of focus and the ways of thinking about image making changed very radically in the 20th century after photography. And you see, less of a focus on trying to accurately replicate reality. And in some cases, this kind of total collapse of any desire to present reality as we ordinarily see it. And so I think that if something is taken away, artists will always look for something else to bring into our awareness. And so for me, I think it's an incredibly exciting time. Already, I see so many AI artists taking novel approaches to their use of the technology and approaching what they're doing with AI in ways that are different from the artists around them. And to me, that's where art happens, like in the personal voice, what we do with the tools. And so in a sense, the question of large language models like ChatGPT and the application of AI in the context of warfare is maybe a separate conversation, and certainly one that I don't feel qualified to comment on. This on screen is an AI image. These images that are the one that's enlarging now. I've taken the output and then put it back into the 3D software and folded the other processes that I do into that. And so then I brought these AI images into the background of the 3D painting works. So my old new painting practice is now sort of integrating my AI painting practice, the AI paintings appear within my other paintings. So works like this doesn't involve any AI, but I might put an AI painting in the background. So yeah, we shall see.
I'm curious to know, have you also then tried creating a work of art using open AI system like Midjourney or DALL-E?
Yeah, so I started with DALL-E too. And with DALL-E, I was uploading, taking like one of my works, like this, the one on screen, take an image like that, upload it to DALL-E or an image like this, and ask it to make versions. And so it would create what it thought the image looked like. So I'm also using Stable Diffusion, which is an open source AI model. And the ones that are coming up on screen now, these are AI outputs that have my kind of glass brushstrokes over the top. So these big gestural gushing marks that you see are, in a sense, me painting over the AI in my virtual digital way, and creating works that, people talk about it as collaborative. I also use ChatGPT a lot on a sort of personal level for admin and text-based work, anything I kind of can automate. Like if I'm writing an email and I have any level of anxiety about getting it right, I use ChatGPT to check what I've written, and edit it. And I always come back and have to change something. It's never straight out of the box. But I feel like that might just be a matter of time until these tools are effortless. It used to be difficult to search for things on the internet. You used to have to be quite specific on Google, but the algorithms improved in terms of predicting what we were looking for. And I don't know anyone that goes past the first page on Google anymore. So I do think we will very quickly have tools that just intuitively speed up things that we want to achieve. I'm gonna zoom back through the video.
So nowadays, like the tools that you mentioned, like ChatGPT or DALI 2, like these technology have been such a strong issue, not just in Korea but all across the globe.
Yeah.
Much bigger than when compared to like NFT or other issues in the past. It's such a global trend now, but at the same time, there seems to be a controversy as to how AI generated art should be considered equivalent as a traditionally created works of art. So, do you view this controversy interesting, or what is your view on this issue debate?
So I feel like one of the big aspects of the debate is the training data and consent of the artists and writers for ChatGPT, for whom their work was used to create these models. With OpenAI, with DALI, we don't know which images we use to train that. Understandably, it's kind of any image they can lay their hands on. And I think in terms of that conversation, it's a very valid concern. And I think that we need to be thinking critically and with an eye on social justice around the compensation of artists, because that value that has been captured is, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so I think, there are two artists, Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst. They run a project called Spawning.ai, and they have arranged for artists to be able to opt out or opt in to future training data sets. And so they're working proactively to find ways for better practices to emerge around these issues. My feeling is that the technology exists. It's very much a kind of Pandora's box thing. So I think the idea of sort of going backwards is not possible at this stage. But I don't think that should be any barrier for us having conversations about the ways that we choose to use these tools collectively. So I think the controversy is natural and to be expected with something that is so disruptive as a technology. I think that it is inevitable that there will be periods of transition in terms of how we integrate these things. In terms of whether AI art is real art, or like whether it should be considered, I don't think it should be considered in the same way, because it's a new context. And so I think we should be thinking about what that context means, because that's just something that's so rich with new ideas for us to explore. But in terms of whether or not it's art, whether or not the creativity of people who use it is as valid as anybody else's creativity, for me, there's no conversation there. It's, I think I can understand how people might jump to reductionist ideas of like, the differences, but to me, it's obvious that you can use this thing as these tools in creative ways, and you can use them in unimaginative ways. And the same applies to any other creative medium. So, and I think what's interesting and what it highlights in terms of what people kind of don't like about the idea of AI art is that there is this, it highlights our emphasis on creative struggle and I guess like the time that it takes to make an artwork. And I feel like a lot of artists in the 20th century have sort of interrogated these ideas. And I don't think there is an equation that exists that can show us how to, I don't think artworks are better if they take longer. Sometimes they're amazing because of a process that took a long time. And there's no doubt that slow, methodical, repetitive tasks can have an incredible impact on practitioners in terms of mental health. And so for painters who spend 6 months on a painting, like, that's a beautiful thing. It doesn't go away because someone can make an AI image in 1.4 seconds. But it isn't a guarantee that that painting that took 6 months will be meaningful or beautiful or challenging or any of the things that we look for in art. It might be, but so might an AI artwork. And that's part of the magic of being alive on this planet.
As we were preparing for this edition of Art Busan, we realized AI technology has been such a big issue in the recent month. And yet we also learned that not many people have in fact really tried and experimented with this technology. So we focus on this issue, and what we are showing at our fair this year is a special experiment booth so that the public can really try this AI technology and create their own work of art, but in a very simple way. So we created a kiosk, and we developed this program and then applied it into this kiosk so that people, just like when going to McDonald's or cafes and ordering a burger or coffee, a cup of coffee, without having to know this particular technology, they can just select the set of questions. They can just choose the images, and then afterwards they get a particular work of art via image according to the images that they have chosen. So we thought the reason why we are giving this and showing this technology and this experience is to because we thought in this way the audience and the public will have less fear about this new technology, and then have better understanding of not just AI generated art, but the contemporary art in general.
I mean, that sounds really fun. I think the comparison to McDonald's is unfair unless we're prepared to make it in the other contexts where we go along and can just buy an artwork or create an artwork quickly. Because but I mean, I think it's that is part of what's exciting about these tools, and is that it can because I think if you put down a whole load of paints and canvases, people might get stuck in, but they also might feel intimidated by knowing that their output would not necessarily be immediately impressive if they hadn't had training in or hadn't spent time developing a painting practice. And I think I'm not afraid of more people accessing what is transformative about making art. And I think in the earlier part of my life, I was very focused on kind of trying to make my art very impressive. That he's a very good artist, he's very talented. Like, that was important to me when I was younger. And I think as I have got older, the psychologically transformative experience of making art and being with creativity and the self-reflection that comes from the vulnerable act of making art, to me, that is so much more important than I guess people's opinions of me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still care. But I think making art changes you, and tools that allow more people to make art, it's a good thing, and it doesn't take away the space or the opportunity for creative excellence. You know, there will always be people who make things that inspire lots of other people and help them, you know, experience something that shifts the way they think or the way that they feel or the depth to which they feel. And that's exciting. And it's always exciting, you know, when somebody does something and everybody's like, wow, look at what's happening. But yeah, I don't think that goes away. And so I think it's good to involve people. And I guess I would argue that, you know, the format of that might, you know, you use this example of McDonald's, and I understand that that's very much a low culture reference. But to me, still, if someone goes into that booth and makes an artwork and they feel excited about it, or it challenges something in them, something sacred is happening.
The reason why you are showing this is because in the art industry, many people view this as just not worth mentioning at all, because it's not a real art. But we thought it'll be really meaningful to really bring it up in the air and really show what it is, so that people can understand and perceive and understand it in a better way, so that they could really appreciate what the real art is. That is shown at the booth right next to this special exhibition.
That's great. And are there a lot of artworks in the fair this year that utilize AI from artists?
Not shown at the gallery booth, but at our part of the special exhibition booth, there are some projects.
Amazing.
Considering the time, I want to ask the last question for you.
Cool.
It might be a vague question, but yet I wanted to throw this question to you. What do you think would be the future of digital art and AI-generated art?
So I think in the future of art is many more art worlds. So I think that we will see, because in a way, the art world that we have, you know, it's been growing so much. You know, you look at it. I speak to curators who were around in the 1960s, and they say there was 40 people in the art world. And obviously, I'm sure that is an exaggeration on some level, but it is, you know, the art world is something that's grown to include more people, more artists, more collectors, more curators, more art fairs, you know, and I see that as a good thing. More museums, and I think that also there will be, I just feel that there will be more. There'll be art worlds that are not necessarily related to this art world, that groups of people who are really excited about certain ways of making images and collecting them will come up. So I see a kind of further democratization of making art and selling art. And I think that NFT technology will be a big part of that, if that isn't already happening. In terms of AI, I think that we cannot imagine the impact of this technology. So I can speculate, but I think it's much bigger than anything I can imagine. And I think it will happen faster than we think as well. But I might be wrong. But I think that we'll go to watch a movie, and we will be able to put people we know into the movie, so we can see, and we can kind of direct the storyline. Like maybe if you're not enjoying it, you can kind of guide it towards something that you've enjoyed more in the past. Like, oh, I wish this movie was more like this, and it will happen in real time. You know, I see DJs playing a gig where they're playing a song that everybody loves, and then a famous musician walks into the club and the DJ changes in real time, changes the song so that the lyrics are performed by the artist who walked into the room. Like, and these are these are just. I think that once the technology is becomes more intuitive, because Mid Journey, you have to know how to use Discord. Stable Diffusion, I had to, I was using Python code to do certain things, but then 2 weeks later there's a piece of software I can use, so I don't have to use the Python. So I think that we're seeing this kind of user interface, and obviously what you've just described in terms of people being able to just walk into an art fair and use AI technology without knowing. So that's part of this, what I see as it will, so I think it's going to change culture as we experience it and make everything a lot more interactive and a lot more personalized, essentially. And I hope that we have the intelligence and the emotional and spiritual maturity to use it in ways that uplift us rather than makes things worse.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I will continue to look forward to your new upcoming experiments with new technologies in the future, and how it'll turn out, and how we could appreciate your work of art continuously in the future.
Thank you so much.
Considering the time remaining, I think we'll have to end our session here today. It has been very valuable session in terms of learning you as a person, as an artist, and how you view and work with different types of digital technology and other whatever that's going to come in the future. So for those of you who haven't yet visited Choi and Choi gallery booth, they are displaying and showing Matthew's new body of works. So it'll be very meaningful to go visit and take a look at his works of art. Thank you again, Matthew.
Thank you so much for having me and for your careful questions, and to everybody who came and watched. Thank you for spending this time together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, and see you next time in person, hopefully.
Yeah, let's do it. Love that. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
네, 오늘 프로그램은 여기까지 하겠습니다. 네, 참석해 주셔서 감사드립니다.